Hey everybody, how's it going? Corey Wakefield here with another V2 Element partial video for you guys, and we're going to be running through the MEJS partial today, which stands for MediaElement JS. That is the library that we use that is bundled as part of WordPress core that deals with cross-browser playback of self-hosted audio or video. So this was much more of an issue a couple years back when different browsers, for the most part, supported different formats. I think for a while Firefox was only supporting OGGs, .ogg files, and for the most part many other browsers supported MP4, and then there were some browsers that didn't support native playback at all, and so having like a flash player for a fallback was a common technique for a while. And so MEJS actually takes all those concepts and kind of bundles it up into a nice neat little package that's real approachable. So if you guys have been using self-hosted audio or video for a while with us, you will know that you could have just thrown like an MP4 file in here, and MEJS would take that, play MP4s for the browsers that could play them, and display, like a flash fallback for Firefox or other browsers that couldn't support that. I believe nowadays, for the most part, I think almost all major browsers support MP4s, if I know correctly, off the top of my head. So that's a safe format to go with. There's also other really cool formats emerging like WebM that you can explore that I don't think quite has the reach of MP4 yet, but there's definitely options. So the first thing you'll see when you get in here is this sources one per line. I wanted to address that because if you want to supply native formats for each browser, you could get crazy and export an MP4 and an OGG format and import all those in here, but for the most part, MP4s will probably get you, or MP3s if it's audio, will get you pretty much all the browser share you need. So just a quick point on that. But for the most part, this MEJS partial really deals with not only setting up and playback of appropriate audio and video sources for the browsers that are viewing them, but you have a little bit of control over the overall playback of that video, how you want it to function. And then we have taken it a little step further, and we give you some control over the controls themselves. So colors, spacing, things like that. And we're going to run through all that here in just a sec. So yeah, that's pretty much the overview, and we will just dive right in here. So the first thing you'll see when you're setting up a self-hosted video or a bit of audio is after you've added your audio or video on this player selection, you will see a controls setup box. And this will look slightly different from video to audio. So if I click on my audio here, you'll see that we've only got 3 options here. And I guess I'll start here and then we'll jump back over to video to see what we can do with that. So the advanced control here, what that does is it will turn on advanced controls for your audio. It also gives a little more feedback in terms of the overall time of the track that's about to play. You get a mute button and you get your play, and that's basically what that does. So just kind of a stylistic difference depending on how involved you want your users to be able to play around with that. There is an autoplay feature, which when you kick that in does exactly what it says. And then we also have a loop feature. So when a song gets to the end, if you have loop turned on and we hit play here, we'll just wait for these final 2-3 seconds to play out, and it'll start right over. So those are pretty straightforward. They do pretty much exactly what you would expect them to do. And they're nice little options to have if you have scenarios where maybe you're making a band website or something that involves a lot of playback of audio that people need for, really it's kind of their portfolio or whatever they're working on. That's a great little tool set to have to play around with. If we hop back over to the video here, you see we get the exact same controls, so we can turn on advanced controls. With video, we get one more option. We get a full screen button that when we click that does, again, exactly what it says. You can see we've got our autoplay and loop options. And then we also have a no controls option and a muted option. So we actually tap into this a little bit when we do like our background videos. We use MEJS's native APIs to, play back the video, make sure it loops when it's done, make sure it's muted, and make sure it auto plays. That's what kind of happens with a background video. We open them up for you all to play around with for your own purposes. There might be situations where you want to, start a video, have it autoplay when a website or when a visitor hits your website, but have it muted at the start. This particular video actually doesn't have any audio, but that's kind of an example there of something you might use, especially if you have maybe a little sales funnel where you're building a landing page maybe it's a video sales page. It's just got like a video and a button for people to click through and buy something. For a situation like that, you might actually want to have it auto-playing and have no controls. So what this does is, the video plays right away when they hit the website for like a video sales page. No controls, because maybe you want to keep them watching the video, not have them scrubbing through. And that's a really great option right there that you can explore. So it's really cool to have those things at your disposal to build out, again, whether they're little portfolio pages, really specific sales pages where you need a very specific set of functionality for your video to behave in a certain way. They don't work, for every scenario, but, for the most part, I think we've all kind of agreed that auto-playing music or video on web pages as a whole is probably not a great thing. But again, for specific instances where maybe people are clicking through to a sales page and they kind of know what they're getting into, it's a great thing to explore. And then this preload content select here is important. It basically deals with instructing the browser with what it should download or preload whenever a user hits your web page. So by default, we have it set to metadata, which just gets a little bit of information from the video before playback. You can set it to none, which will tell the browser to really just not do anything with that video element on load. And when the user hits play, they will be opting into downloading all of that video. Or you can set up to auto, which will effectively try to preload as much of the video as possible before the user hits play, so that they, for a little bit of a more performant experience. But again, keep in mind the hit on the front end as the whole page is loading, you're trying to download that video as well. So just little things to keep in mind when setting those up. So that controls setup box really deals more with the overall functionality of the players. And then as we move down the line here, you'll see that we've got options for changing the color of our controls, which I'll get into in just a second. For the video element only, you'll have this controls margin box, which really deals with the spacing of that scrub bar at the bottom of the video. So it kind of maxes out at 20 pixels because really anything beyond that's a little kind of intrusive in the video. But you could do everything from a more modern player, which might have that bar, flush against the edge to get all that maximum space, or you might, scrub it in just a little bit to have it offset. Really just depends on the kind of look you're going for. And then all of these options are the same for audio and video. So for controls padding, what that does is, if we have this linked right now, you'll notice when I bump this padding in, I'm able to kind of change the overall weight of that scrub bar and how it looks. So really where this is most helpful is if you want to do something like having a rounded control box, you might want to come into this padding and adjust that, because really having a little bit of padding on the sides, my right and left side, when I've got a kind of pill shape for my control box, that will help round out the look a little bit more. If you had this, butted up right against the end, that feels a little off. But you can use that padding to bump in the scrub bar, bump in the controls, and depending on how you want to set up things like border radius, you can do a lot with that. Border does, exactly what we would expect it to do. So we can add a 2-pixel border. We'll just make that kind of a light gray or a white so we can see that. Get rid of that. Control box shadow, again, pretty much exactly what you would expect. And then we also have a time rail border radius, which is the border radius you see of the time rail right here. So I can bump that from a square to a totally rounded shape to kind of match, my controls here. And then once I start tweaking these designs, I can come back here to my padding, and maybe I might want to bump this side out a little bit. That feels kind of right. And then bump these controls in a little bit more. Now we've got this equal spacing here. So again, I'm just playing with ideas kind of off the top of my head. There's a lot to explore that you guys can play around with. And then we have our time rail box shadow. So if you want to put a little bit of a shadow on the time rail itself, it's actually very subtle. Let me bump this down. Actually, I'll do like a lighter color here. So you see that shadow there. We might bump that down. It's a little too much. So again, lots of little things you can play with to get a little bit more depth out of your player, to really brand it with your colors. In fact, let's just kind of play around with an idea. So let's try making this white at first. And then I will add a little bit of a shadow. See that shadow kind of coming in there. It's a little tough to see with the image, but a little bit of a shadow to my control box. And then let's do our buttons. So we'll do like a black. Yeah, let's just invert these. And let's say on hover, I want to make it red. Sort of like that. Let's actually get rid of this shadow on the time rail. And then our current time, let's make that red as well. Bump this down just a little bit. All right, so you can kind of see, and then if I made this advanced, I've got my text that I need to get just right. Bump that out a little bit. All right, so now we've got something a little more themed. You'll notice I've got my current play bar playing back at red. So again, you can use this to match, the branding, the colors of your website, make it feel a little more integrated with whatever you're, wanting to do on your website. And this is again great for marketing stuff where you really want it to look a specific way. Lots of cool stuff you can play around with that, and lots of options just with a few simple features here. Like we said, the exact same thing is pretty much available on audio. You can do all the same tweaks, playing with padding, playing with the overall size and setup. The couple little differences you'll get are with the audio, you do get an overall margin control. So if you wanted to, bump this from the top by 2 M's, you could do that. And so that's just for general positioning with the audio element, and if you need to center it in something that was not the bars for header or footer builder, like maybe the content columns, you could do, auto to center that out. But again, we've got just these margin controls here. And then over here, the one thing you'll want to keep in mind is the width and max width settings. So the audio by itself will always be 100% wide, but have a max width of about 300 pixels. You can adjust that to your needs, or even do none if you want, and have it just fill up all the space. So it's a very flexible little player to play around with. And those controls from margin to width and max width are actually available in the frame settings for video. And we have a video on the frame partial that you guys should check out if you haven't already. But that frame partial is what is kind of the containing element for content like video and maps. And so you can use that to not only style a actual frame around it, but also set up the width and max width for those elements and play around with positioning, with overall margin, things like that. So definitely a lot to explore, and a really cool feature if you're using self-hosted audio. We know that there's lots of services out there like Vimeo and whatnot, or Wistia, where maybe you're already doing stuff through them and just kind of piping it through to your site. But it's really great to be able to explore this stuff and really have an interface that you can play around with or brand. And something you can explore too is taking, if you have like a Vimeo Pro account, self-hosting that video on Vimeo so that the hosting is all off on them, and then pulling the MP4 file down from Vimeo, putting it in here, and then using your own controls to set up a Vimeo player. That's something you can kind of explore too. So there's lots of different options and ways you can play around with this stuff and use it as you need. So we hope you guys have found this helpful. Just wanted to take a moment to run through that MEJS partial for you guys, and we look forward to bringing some new videos to you all very soon. Bye.